Hi everyone, Thomas Desmond here, developer advocate at Sitecore, and today I want to show you how you can deploy a Next.js XM Cloud app out to Netlify. If you're not familiar with Netlify, it's a great front-end hosting platform offering many of the same features as Vercel. Netlify has first-class support for Next.js and is an option well worth considering if you're looking at your front-end hosting options. So today I'm going to go through deploying a Next.js XM Cloud app out to Netlify. The site I have is also a static site, so I want Netlify to be automatically notified whenever I push out changes to Experience Edge. So we'll take a look at how we can do that in this video as well, hooking up a deploy hook inside of Netlify to a webhook inside of Experience Edge so that Netlify is notified of any changes that we push out to Edge and automatically redeploys our site. Stick around for a great video. Before we jump into deploying our site out to Netlify, I want to mention a few assumptions that I'm making inside of this video. First off, I'm assuming that you have an XM Cloud app built with Next.js that's ready to deploy. And by ready to deploy, I mean that your content has been pushed out to Experience Edge. So if you have an XM Cloud app that's been built with Next.js and all of your content has been published out to the Edge, then you're ready to go with this video. If not, I'll have a link in the video description below where Sebastian creates a new XM Cloud app. The first thing that we need to do in order to prepare ourselves for a Netlify deployment is gather our environment variables. And luckily there aren't too many. First, we're going to need to get our Experience Edge API key, and I'll walk us through that. Next is we're going to need our GraphQL endpoint, and this is where we're going to hit Experience Edge. Luckily, we already have the value for this one, so it's going to be edge.sitecorecloud.io. We'll want to set our fetch width, and this is going to be set to GraphQL because we want to be able to fetch the Experience Edge endpoint using GraphQL. And now the last environment variable is a little bit trickier because this is the public URL. And you'll only need this if you are below Sitecore JSS Next.js package 21.3. So if you're on 21.3 or above, you wouldn't need this. JSS is going to automatically populate this variable for you. But if you're like me and you're not on 21.3 yet, you will need to set the public URL. And for our case, this is going to be that publicly accessible URL where we're hosting our site. So it is going to make things a little tricky in Netlify because before we deploy, we don't know what our public URL is going to be. So we're going to have to deploy and then set this one after. But again, if you're on the Sitecore JSS Next.js package 21.3, you won't need to set this public URL. So now let's take a look at how we can get that Experience Edge API key. The XM Cloud documentation gives us a few ways to generate an Edge API key. I'll link to this documentation down below, but I think that the easiest way is going to the deploy app and generating an API key there. So let's head over to the deploy app now. Here in the dashboard for the XM Cloud deploy app, I'm in my projects section. I can click on the project that I want to create my API key for, then the environment. Heading into details, I can now generate an Edge token here. This token is going to be what we're going to give to Netlify, and it's going to allow it to connect out to our staging environment and pull content down. That was the only environment variable that we needed to generate ourselves. So now we can head over to Netlify and start adding our site there. So I'm here now at netlify.com and want to start deploying my site. So first off, let's log in. And I'm taken to the dashboard where I have all of my different sites and a lot of different options inside of here. I've got a couple sites already, but I want to add a new site. I want to create that new site for SugCon North America. I can go to Add Site. I'm going to import an existing project. And my project exists on GitHub, so let's go with Deploy with GitHub. If you haven't already authorized GitHub in Netlify, then you might need to do that yourself. And I want to, instead of being in my own environment, I'm going to go to the Sitecore environment. And I have the XM Cloud introduction project here that we want to deploy. Now, one thing that's a little bit different with my project is the fact that the XM Cloud introduction project actually has quite a few Next.js apps. It has a C# app. It's got just static HTML sites as well. So there's a lot of different projects inside of there. Generally, Netlify will actually detect that your project is a Next.js application and fill out some of these options for you. But I believe because our site just has so many projects, it's got C#, Next.js, it's got multiple different apps in it, it's not able to detect that our specific app underneath is a Next.js app. So I will need to do a little bit more configuration, and you'll even see that I'll need to do some configuration after the deploy. If you're using just a pure Next.js app, you'll usually see that Netlify detects it as Next.js and will fill out some of these options for you. But For us, and maybe for you, you might need to fill out some of these options. So let's start filling these out and get ready to deploy. So the base directory for my project is actually going to be source, project, subcon, subcon.na, SXA. And that's going to be where my project lives inside of this big repo. And the build command is going to be npm run build. That's the build command that we use for Next.js. And my publish directory is going to be the same as that base directory up above, but now with .next. I want all of my content to be published out to that .next directory. That's going to be a Next.js standard. Functions directory, I can leave that blank because I don't have any functions right now, but we do need to add our environment variables. And for this, we're going to define environment variables, and they're going to actually apply for all environments right now. If you need more flexibility, if you need environment variables that only get used for production, staging, or development, you can change that afterwards. But right now, these environment variables we set here will be used across all environments. So the first one is going to be that Sitecore API key. That's the Experience Edge API key that we just got. So our key is Sitecore API key, and we'll paste in that code that we just generated. We'll need the GraphQL endpoint. Again, this is that hard-coded value, and we'll want to have a fetch with and have that set to GraphQL. If you remember, we'll need that public URL to be set, but I don't know what my public URL is until I've deployed my application. So I'm going to let this deploy, and then also I'm going to have to set the runtime to Next.js afterwards. I'm not sure how to set this in this configuration here. It doesn't seem to be able to let you just say, hey, this is a Next.js application, so I will need to do that afterwards. So let's just say deploy to deploy our XM Cloud. This will start building, but whatever is building, it'll probably fail, or at least it won't pass with what we want. So let's go to our site configuration. Inside of build and deploy, I will need the runtime, you'll notice it's not set here, so let's configure that. Now I'm able to pick that it's a Next.js application. We'll save. So now our deploy did finish, but without that public URL set. So we'll open our production deploy, and you'll notice that, well, none of the styles are there, and that's because it's trying to pull the styles from localhost rather than from where it's actually been deployed. So I'm going to copy this URL that we have at the top. So I'm going to set that as my value for the public URL key. Go over to my site configuration, environment variables. And this is also where you can change if you want to have your values different for production, deploy, branch deploys. You can make all those changes here, but I want to add a variable, my single variable, key, public URL, and I'm going to have it be that URL that we're now using for our main branch. Create the variable, go to my deploys, and this latest published one, I'm going to have the options, clear cache and retry. This is going to rebuild now that we have that new environment variable set, and we should see our site with the styles all intact there. So I'll come back once this is done building, and we will look at that site. All right, this new version has just been published, and that has the public URL set. So let's head over to that deploy and see what it looks like. Cool, looks a lot better. We've got our styles. It's not all just pushed over to the left. We've got everything looking perfect here. So what does that mean? That means that we have deployed a XM Cloud Next.js app to Netlify. We have our site set up. It's pulling from Experience Edge and it's deploying to Netlify. So we've got, I think that's pretty cool. We're at a really good stage here. But one thing that we need to consider is that this is only picking up changes that get pushed to GitHub. But for a lot of us, we're pushing to Edge, not to GitHub when we make changes. So what we want to do now is set up Netlify so that it recognizes when changes happen to the Edge. So the way we can do that is by setting a deploy hook in Netlify, and that's going to give us a URL that we can hit, and whenever that URL is hit, Netlify will do a rebuild. So we will need to tell Experience Edge to hit this endpoint once it's done deploying and whenever new content has been pushed out. So let's take a look at how we can do that, setting up a deploy hook in Netlify and having a webhook in Experience Edge that hits that deploy hook. So the first thing that we want to do is create our deploy hook inside of Netlify. Inside of site configuration and build and deploy section, we can scroll down until we find the build hook section. So we want to add a build hook. A build hook gives you a unique URL that you can use to trigger a build. Add a build hook, and we're going to call this experience edge, and the branch to build will be the main branch. Whenever this URL gets hit, it's going to rebuild the main branch. This is what I want. I'll save that. And now we get a URL that we can hit. And whenever this URL is hit, it will start a rebuild. So let's see how we can automate Experience Edge to hit this URL. So what we're going to be using is the admin API for Experience Edge. It's a REST API that enables you to administer your Experience Edge for XM tenants. So the base URL is this one right here. And if you look at the authentication section, all endpoints use bearer authorization. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is get ourselves an authorization token. So let's check out this section here, request a JSON web token for Experience Edge XM using OAuth. So what we need to do is essentially hit this endpoint with the auth token endpoint and with the request body, including the audience, grant type, client ID, and client secret. Audience and grant type, those are hard coded with the values there, but client ID and client secret, where do we get those? We can get those from the deploy app for Sitecore. Go to the deploy.sitecorecloud.io. And inside of here, if we go to credentials and environment, we can see and create credentials that can be used as our client ID and client secret. I already have one created. I have my client ID here, and the client secret, you only get to see it once. So make sure that you save it when you do get it. But on the right-hand side, create credentials and edge administration is what you need. Give it a name, description, choose the project that you want it for. In our case, it was XM Cloud Introduction V1, and the environment, you can choose production or staging. I chose staging. But here you can create that client secret and client ID that you need in order to authorize with the admin API. So going over to Postman, let's actually see creating and getting these steps done. So I'm inside of Postman, and I'm going to make a post request to this OAuth token endpoint. My body is containing a audience, grant type, client ID, and client secret that I've generated previously. So if I send this request, I get a 200 response back, and I get my access token that's going to be used whenever I want to authenticate with the admin API. So let me copy this token. And what I'm going to do is use that in my webhooks endpoint. So let's take a look really quick though back at the API documentation. So I can go back to the endpoints documentation, and there is the create webhook documentation here. Creates a new webhook. So what we want to do is hit the webhooks endpoint with a post request, and we're going to have a body that looks like this. We don't have any header information that needs to go. We don't have any body information, but everything else we'll want. And that URI there is that URI of the Netlify deploy. So we want to make sure that that's the URI that gets hit. And the execution mode on end, we want that to be on end so that at the end of the publish stage of Experience Edge, it will send out that webhook and post request to the Netlify endpoint. So let's see how that happens in Postman. If you remember, it needed a post request. Let's make sure we change this to post. In my authorization, I want to set my bearer token to that token that we just copied and got from the auth request. I can look at my body. I have JSON set here, and I've got my Netlify deploy. I'm going to set this as my old endpoint from previously testing. So let's set this to the new one. My method is post. It's created by me, Thomas, and the execution mode is on end. So if I send this out, we get the 201, and we can see that this is created down here at the bottom. Let's make this a little bigger. We got the URI, it's set, it's got an ID, tenant ID now, it's in the staging environment, which is great. This looks like everything we need. Just to verify, we can also, making a GET request, the same endpoint should get all of our webhooks that we have created. It's an array, and we only have the single webhook. But what this means now is if we publish any changes out to Experience Edge in that staging environment, we should now see that Netlify picks up those changes and rebuilds our application. So let's actually try that out. So let's head over to the staging environment and make a change. Go into staging, and taking a quick peek at our site again, I'm going to just change this header. Instead of saying SugCon North America 2023, I'm going to get rid of the 2023 and just publish that change out. Just a small change, but something that will publish out the edge and cause a change to happen. So I want to make the change to the SugCon North America site in XM Cloud pages. Here I am for the site in SugCon North America, and we can see that it still says SugCon North America 2023. I can right in line here, change this, get rid of the 2023, and in the top right is the publish button. That publish button is going to publish this out to Experience Edge. So if I publish this item out, it'll take a few minutes for that publish to happen and be able to get out and distribute it across Experience Edge. But what we will see here in Netlify is that a new deploy will happen, and it will be with a deploy message started from Experience Edge or Webhook from Experience Edge, something along those lines. And we will see that in a few minutes here inside of Netlify. So let's take a look and wait for that to come in here. All right, it took just a minute or two, but Netlify was notified of our publish to Experience Edge. We can see deploy triggered by Hook, Experience Edge. So Netlify rebuilt our site with those changes that we pushed out. So let's take a look at the published site, open our production deploy. We see that the 2023 is gone. So our change inside of XM Cloud of the data item was pushed out to Experience Edge. Netlify was notified of that change, rebuilt our site automatically, and now reflects those changes. So we've got an XM Cloud Next.js app hosted on Netlify and being automatically notified of changes to Experience Edge. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more content like this. I'll also link to Sebastian's video that has a bunch of great XM Cloud tutorials that he's putting out, so make sure to check those out. But with that, thanks for watching.